So Inventory Source is a company that nobody's heard of. Does a thing that you would never know needs to be done. So I think I'll start by outlining so the e-commerce kind of landscape is interesting. So e-commerce landscape, typically, you buy your products and you buy a bunch of them and you warehouse them and you get an order and then you ship it from your warehouse out to your customer. Pretty standard. So most people are familiar with of a supply chain kind of concept, but that's changed a lot. It's not a new change, but it's an increasingly, exponentially increasing change with the way technology is changing it and just the way logistics are working. So dropship is a term that, if you're not familiar with it, dropship is really, you don't actually buy the product from your distributor. There's distributors that warehouse your products. And when you dropship it, you can sell that product and you ship this product to that customer. So you never take ownership of it. You sell it on your website, your kiosk in your store, wherever you're selling it, and it ships straight to your customer from your distributor. And you buy it after you sell it, basically. So that's kind of how a lot of online commerce works, because you don't need the product physically there when you're selling it from your website. So for example, Walmart's done that forever from its website. When you buy from Walmart, it's not coming from a Walmart warehouse or the store, it's coming straight from their supplier or their distributor to your house, because it's just more efficient that way than shipping it around and storing it in warehouse. So that's the concept of dropship. And then there's the third-party logistics firms. The most common one is Fulfilled by Amazon. If you haven't heard of that, you can ship your products to Amazon, and Amazon ships it out for you, leverages their logistics and their facilities, and ships it straight to your customer. So that's called third-party logistics. So the idea of that is both of those, you're kind of outsourcing the need to store product, manage your product, buy more product, and do the whole inventory management piece. You're letting your distributors do that for you, and you're going to specialty providers that can warehouse and manage those logistics for you. So that's kind of how more and more in e-commerce is going. So you have your website, you're selling on Amazon, you're selling on Walmart, maybe you have multiple niche websites, and each of those is coming from some products that are in your own warehouse, and some directly from your distributors that you're listing on your site, and some that are coming from products that you ship to Amazon that are there. So now you have inventory in multiple locations. You have virtual inventory, which is your suppliers that have it available to you to buy at your buyer, your wholesale, your dealer rate, and they'll ship it, but so do other people have claims on that. So now you have virtual inventory. So what all this means is it becomes a data problem. So basically here, when you have the physical product, you don't have to worry so much. You have 1 in stock, you have 10 in stock, you have 12 in stock. If you're moving to the dropship model, you don't have to buy the product, you don't have to store the product, you're not investing money in warehousing it, but the product might be gone by the time you're ready to fulfill on it because somebody else sold it, because you didn't physically own it yet. And the price changes just you have to stay in touch with things that are changing outside of your control. And so all of these things point to it being a data challenge, and there's more and more e-commerce happening this way. So that's kind of so the way it works now, it's a convoluted space with a bunch of old school players that work on emailing and faxing or XML feeds, or maybe they have an API, or maybe they have a website you can log into, maybe it's a CSV file, or it's a weird data on the fulfillment side. Not a lot of standardization, and across different suppliers and distributors you may work with. So a lot of larger retailers these days that work with multiple sources have teams that have to manage this data, scrub this data, cleanse it, ingest it, a couple of tools, Excel, everything defaults to Excel like it always tends to. And then go out and list it on your website, on Amazon, on your Shopify site, maybe some eBay listings. So there's a lot of manual data management in the middle of the process and the typical flow of it right now. There are tools like us, but that's kind of where we sit. So we're integration software. So we deal with all the nitty-gritty standardization of whether it's coming from an XML feed, a series of CSV feeds, merging categories, and pulling in data and how often it changes, whether it changes hourly, every 30 minutes, twice a day, all these frequencies that you have to deal with for being kind of as real-time and as up-to-date as possible. We're ingesting all that software, and we also integrate with pretty much everywhere you can sell a product online. So we're on the Amazon API, we're an app in Shopify, we're an app in Magento, app in Ecommerce. We integrate with eBay, we integrate with Walmart, we integrate with Sears, basically for the most major places you can sell. So we ingest it and standardize the data around our own product model, which is always evolving based on every new thing that we have to deal with. And we can adjust all that, have a series of tools for, which you're going to see in a minute, like how we do all this, but for filtering, managing, setting your prices, curating your catalogs that go based on different channels, all these things, this big, managing lots of data from your products, from your different sources, and how you want to deal with it on your sales channels. So that's kind of the big picture of where we sit in the e-commerce spectrum, and it's actually a very growing need. It's increasingly becoming the trend to either outsource your fulfillment to dropship providers directly or third-party fulfillment facilities. So it's changing it from a physical box management to a data management challenge in the whole e-commerce landscape. And it's a big business with a big shift that's going on in that. So that's kind of where we sit, and it's a data moving is what we do, and that's what the software does. So I'll turn it over to how we do it and let Matt tell us that.
This is where it gets fun. Basically, how we do it, we have two different sections, right? We automate product data and inventory data. And so, if something goes out of stock on one of your suppliers, you need to have that reflected on your marketplace, your channel that you're selling on, so that you don't sell a product that you can't fulfill on, fundamentally, right? And so with that, there are a lot of challenges. Kelly did talk about basically there are different data formats, right? So you've got XML, CSV, API-driven stuff, JSON, EDI, all these different formats of data on different protocols that you have to consume. And so we manage that by building out integrations to each of these suppliers. And then we can reuse those integrations across all of our different customers that leverage us. And then we offer a suite of tools that enable retailers to do a bunch of different things, but fundamentally it enables them to choose what products they actually want to sell, right? Because you have maybe 10,000, 100,000 products that are in this feed, and you need to see which one of those match criteria that meets what you're looking for, right? And so we give them opportunities to select different products. The data is not always great, so they basically leverage our tools to create content around their product, right? Modify titles, descriptions, images. We'll go into that more later, as well as manage different prices, right? So every supplier is going to sell things at different prices, and it's important that they can be able to retain some sort of margin on that, right? And so they need to be able to manage that process and automate that too, like Kelly was saying, like if that price changes, right? So maybe one day their manufacturer ups the price, and now they need to compensate for that, right? And so we give them tools to manage all that process. And along with product content, there's also categories. And so many different marketplaces require you to map certain categories, for example. And maybe you just want to have a really good category structure on your personal website. And so we give them tools to manage that as well. After they kind of use all this suite of tools to manage that, then we have integrations out to all these different platforms. We have about 50 different platforms we're integrated with. And we can sync that data up. So we can push full product data up, we can sync existing inventory and prices, and we give that to them in a seamless experience from the inventory side. There's also the ordering side, which is more complicated, but in simplest form, basically when a customer, like if I was to go to Amazon tomorrow and I bought an item, right, that item is going to go to some sort of seller that's in this process most likely. And so what that's going to do is we're going to sync that order down into our system. We can automatically process that to the suppliers because we have those integrated, right? And then when they ship that item out, right, because again, we're focusing on the retailer here, when they ship that item out, we're going to import that shipment so the retailer doesn't have to go check their supplier for newly shipped items, right? And then we're then going to sync that shipment back to the platform so that the customer can ultimately get notified and say, hey, your package has been shipped, here's the tracking information, right? You can go monitor your tracking status here. And so we manage that process as well, and then we give them interfaces and tools to facilitate that. So there's a lot of different focuses we have. We have ETL, we have data automation, data analytics, data tools to help manage that process. So we're going to start out and focus on data automation, and this is how we're able to automate that whole process. So if we crunch the numbers on like what we're currently doing right now, we have about 10 million active products in our system. We have 200 different suppliers integrated. We have 4,500 different retailer channels that we're constantly automating inventory and product data to. And we have roughly 2 million changes in inventory levels every single day. And last month, we synced 1.6 billion products across all these different channels. And we were able to do about 1 million order checkpoints, which are, if the order's been shipped, if the order needs to be processed, anything like that, that's considered a checkpoint. We did about 1 million of those last month too. So we're starting to get into big data, I guess. But so this is our tech stack that we use to manage it. It's really complicated, and this picture is really simplified even from where it's at. But just to give some basics around it, we have server farms dedicated to monitoring supplier data. and those all run integrations that are connected to those suppliers so that we can pull out inventory, product data, tracking information, etc. And we found that we couldn't hit the database directly for all of these transactions, because if you're doing millions and millions of products, every hour, then you need to be able to have some sort of centralized system that you can quickly access, and it's not going to join all this relational data and things like that a database does. And so we leverage Redis, and so as we monitor inventory data from the suppliers, we store that in our Redis cache cluster, which, if it means anything to you, it's scalable horizontally, so we can add more shards to that as we go, and we can scale the system up as we increase our product data. And then from there, all of our syncing to our platforms, right? It's a separate server farm that we have, and that's going to access the Redis cache cluster directly. So basically, we're going to eliminate the database from this picture as much as we possibly can in order to transmit that data at increasing speeds, right? That's important because these retailers, the reason they're using our service is because they need to automate and keep this data in sync, right? And so from a data perspective, if we didn't leverage something like Redis, right, we wouldn't be able to deliver on the high frequency updates that we have to in order to manage this process and get everyone in factory quantities, right? So that's basically our backend stack. We have a centralized job API that we hand-built, and we're basically improving it all the time. It enables us to be able to distribute these jobs across different servers and allow the user to schedule on-demand syncs if they ever need to sync something immediately and they can't wait for the next sync to run. So we have that we have in our system. And then the yellow over here is kind of like the front end, where that's then we give everybody tools to manage all this data, right? And we show them all the content, we show them everything that their supplier's working with, and we give them tools to be able to manage that content. So in order to deliver on that, we're leveraging Solar, which Brad will talk more about shortly. But basically, the idea with that is it allows us to be able to search and filter and sort on data very quickly, and it deals with massive amounts of data. So we'll show an example where we deal with 2.6 million products, and let's filter it down to 300,000 in seconds across multiple different data points. So we use that on our front end, and then everything kind of just falls back to the database at the end of the day, for basic things like CRUD and things like that. But we basically don't persist data up to the database. Another big advantage of Redis is that we can use that to check for differences. So if something hasn't changed since the last time we checked the supplier, then there's no reason to persist that data up to the database, right? That's just an extra transaction. It's more time that's not needed, and it's expensive from a resource operation. So in order for us to leverage any data, in order for us to use any tools, the data ingestion is important, right? And so this is how we're getting that data from various sources, and we're standardizing that into our domain model that we can then leverage to push to different platforms, right? So what we ingest from suppliers and platforms, from the platform side, the only thing we ever ingest from a platform side is new orders that we need to fulfill on, right? So if you get an order on Amazon, we're going to be ingesting that data into our system so that we can then process that to the supplier, right? If from the supplier side, this is where the bulk of ingestion comes in. This is where we're going to pull product and inventory data, and that can range from just price, inventory, and status to full product content. We have a lot of competitors, like Kelly was saying, but most of the competitors never even touch this product content because it's a very difficult process to integrate that and map it into some sort of central domain structure that can then map out to all these different various platforms that require all these different specialities and things like that. And categories is a big one too. This is basically enabling us to, categories are central, right? If you go to a website and you're trying to find a product to order, you leverage category structure 9 times out of 10 to be able to find the type of product you're looking for, right? And so in order to get those from the supplier, we also have to pull that in. And variation structure, this is one that everybody knows about, but they may not understand what the relevance in e-commerce. But basically, when you go to buy a shirt, right, you don't buy a shirt, you buy a small shirt, a blue shirt, right? You buy different variations of the shirt. And so variation structure is really important because when you go to sell a product, if I'm going and I'm looking at 16 different products that are the same shirt in different sizes and different colors, and I have to somehow distinguish which one of those I want to get, it's a very bad experience from a customer perspective, right? And so if you're trying to have retailers that are actually making sales and doing well with their customers, you need to be able to import variation structure, and you need to be able to provide that to retailers so that they can then leverage that and basically have a better experience from buying the product, right? Higher conversion rates on sales and things like that. And then on the order side, we import acknowledgements sometimes. So if we were to receive an order from a platform, like Jet is a good example, we have to respond and say, hey, we got this order, we're going to take care of it, don't worry about it. And also tracking information. So once we actually do take care of that order, we need to tell them back and say, hey, we've acknowledged this order, here's the shipment information, you can go deliver this tracking information to whoever needs it, and they'll send out a notification to the customer. And so how we ingest the data, this is where we have a little bit of ETL in here, and we also have just some infrastructure things that we built in. The ETL, basically, we have a core integration workflow, right? So every integration that gets built on our system is built into some sort of core, right? And with that, it enables us to reuse a lot of logic, have settings that are consistent across all of our different integrations on like how you want to manage that data. And then from there, we'll then map in specific fields for that specific integration, right? We'll say like, all right, you have title in the field, you know, body HTML or something, right? Like we'll map that into our system, we'll ingest that data, and then in our system now, we'll see that as the actual title, right? So just basic ETL stuff there, and we can customize that as needed. And then there's a big one here where it's kind of a known problem, where basically suppliers have the idea of restricting product access, right? If I'm a supplier and I have Nike in my system and like I can sell Nike products, but Nike doesn't want everybody to be able to sell that, right? It would diminish the value of it. They want to have certain retailers selling Nike, or maybe everybody can sell a certain product, but they've got different pricing tiers. Like if I'm a good retailer, you'll give me a better rate, right? This is what this custom pricing product access is. So our system supports that, or we can enable these suppliers to distribute to their retailer networks, and basically preserve that custom pricing, preserve that custom access, and we can pull that into our system. So when we integrate with a retailer and somebody goes to buy a service with us, they have to give us specific credentials to be able to say you have access to these products or something like that, right? And then understanding unique workflows. This kind of comes with every sort of ETL, development that you do. Basically, every supplier is going to be different. Sometimes they'll give you a feed of 300 products that change every hour. Sometimes they'll give you, every single product in their entire system every hour, right? And so we just have to understand those niche workflows and be able to build our integrations to support those. So how we support this, like from an infrastructure standpoint, it's kind of a constant evolving process. But right now, what we have is we have about 15 servers. They're all scalable horizontally. So again, if we get more load on our jobs or anything like that, we can increase the number of servers we have so that we can support the need. We always cache the data to Redis immediately. And basically, the idea is that data should immediately be available if an updating sync were to run, right? If somebody else is currently getting their Amazon platform update and we're constantly getting supplier updates in there, that data is immediately available to the retailer, right? So from a management of data, we always want accurate data at all times, and if there was some sort of transactional system in place to be able to process that, it would take additional time, and they may not always get the accurate updates, right? So Redis is our central cluster, and we use that as like our source of truth for most product data, and if that ever were to get corrupted, we always have the databases backed up, right? In that process, like I kind of mentioned before, we check for differences in the data. So if we don't need to persist anything because there's been no change in the past hour, right, then we can handle that process without utilizing extra resources, without going up to the database and back, and it makes our jobs monitoring supplier data extremely fast in that regard, right? We're only monitoring what's different, and the job time increases tenfold if you just monitor the differences. And the big one here too is triggering jobs at different frequencies. So Kelly kind of touched on this a little bit, but the idea that some suppliers we're connected to via an API, right? And if we're connected to it via an API, then it's real-time data. Every request we make, we're going to get new data. We can constantly keep that data up to date in our system, right? But if we have a CSV file that's dropped on an FTP and that only updates once a day, then we can monitor that too, but there's no reason to monitor that CSV file 30 times a day, right? It's never going to change. And so we have, in that kind of job API, that custom scheduling that we built out, we have the ability to schedule things at different frequencies and distribute those to our servers as needed, right? So with that, after we ingest all the data, it's important to be able to do something with that data, right? And so that's where Brad's going to talk about the data tools and how we can leverage some of that.
Yeah, so we're going to talk briefly about the data tools that we provide to our retailers to help them manage this big set of data that they were traditionally doing in a CSV or Excel spreadsheet. At a high level, this is kind of the tooling we provide. It's kind of a lot, but this is it boiled down to simple terms, right? So we have the product feed, right? That's the base feed we're ingesting from the supplier and taking into our system without anything done to it by the retailer. And then we have a catalog, which we basically define as the curated subset of products from the feed that you want to sell that you can be competitive on and earn a margin on. And how do you earn a margin on it? Well, you have to have good pricing rules. So we have base rules that apply to your entire feed, or the curated portion of the catalog, right? And typically you'd see people do like a tiered percent markup, essentially saying anything from 0 to 100, I want to add $5 or 5% and maybe a fixed edition. We have some advanced rules like landed cost, right? Because a big problem in the dropship industry is you don't know how much you may have to pay for shipping costs, right? The supplier may give you a shipping cost on the item in the feed, but when you go to ship it out, you don't know where you're going to ship it to. If you're only shipping lower 48, you may be able to keep it manageable, but a lot of people use what we call like landed cost, which is like if the product weighs 5 to 8 pounds, add X dollars, right? And that's how I can kind of compensate for knowing an unknown shipping cost. We also have other pricing rules where you can mark up an entire category or subcategory, right? And a brand specific markup, or even at a very product level, you can say like always keep this product marked up at 15%, right? Enables you to be competitive when the prices change because those are outside of your control, right? We also have category mapping, as Matt kind of talked about. Categories are central to your experience as a user on a third-party website when you're going to make a purchase or browse the product selection that's on there. So we allow you to rename it, move products under new parents, right? Like they have a two category deep structure. You want to move it to a 3 category deep. Maybe you want to replace a certain category with the manufacturer name. We also have the problem of product content, right? So well, actually, back to categories real quick. The suppliers, they don't always provide you the best category names. It could be some long, repetitive, every category in the dog category is dog collars / something, dog collars and something else, right? So you need to centralize that and roll it up essentially to be easier to manage. And that kind of comes into the content too, where the title, description, some suppliers may not provide this at all. And some suppliers may provide a very rudimentary, it's almost like a part number in the title. So that's not going to help you sell anything, right? So you may even want to add YouTube videos, etc., right? And images, those are foundational to your purchasing experience as a user on a website. So having good images is very important. And we also provide some other data points which are customizable. So it essentially makes we're also a central hub for you to manage all your product content. And then our order manager, as Matt kind of talked, the full flow, that enables you to say like, show me all the orders I'm waiting on being processed or anything that I have partially shipped, right? Because say you had an order that came from 2 different suppliers. One of them has already shipped the order, but one's not, right? You need to make sure that gets resolved quickly. So we have tooling to help you visualize and analyze what state all your orders are in. So some of the UI and UX challenges we experience with this set of data is we have feed counts ranging anywhere from 500, 1K, all the way up to 3 million. So it's a very diverse range of product size that we have to help these retailers manage. The big challenge is if every retailer just had the same data, this really wouldn't be that hard of a problem. But because they each have unique access to a certain subset of products, because suppliers say, retailer A, you have these 10,000 products, and retailer B, you have those 10,000 plus these 5,000, right? So it's not just this blanket, all right, here, everyone go sell these products and at this price, right? Because they also get unique pricing and quantity. Some retailers may have access to certain warehouses that others don't, and may have a better relationship with a supplier where they get 20% off wholesale where another only gets 5%. So some of the interaction and manipulation challenges here, the ability to search, filter, and sort through that distinct subset of products, right? We're talking anywhere from 1K to 3 million products, and they want to be able to do it quickly so that they can make decisions and also perform bulk actions on those, because it's what you used to do in a spreadsheet, you now need to do like in real time with a full UI, with content data, looking at all those price changes, looking at all the category changes, saying like, how is this product going to appear on my insight? You need to be able to visualize that quickly. So this is a big one too. Since each retailer has that subset of products, we want to be able to provide them a category mapping tool, right? Well, you don't want to show them categories from those other 5,000 products they didn't have access to, right? So you need a distinct set of categories specific to that retailer with how many products are in this category. What about how many subcategories in this category and the product count within that subcategory, right? This is different for every single retailer potentially. So it's a big data problem right there. And this is the same thing for brand. And as I kind of discussed, showing the real-time catalog of saying what should be on your third-party site right now, and what's the price that this product is supposed to be selling for. So there's a big visualization problem there when you're doing that across 3 million products. And then also, right, you need to be able to say, I just did a search, I want to be able to add these 200,000 products into my catalog to start selling immediately. So you need to be able to do that quickly. So before we show the actual searching and filtering, here is basically what we call like our advanced searching or our catalog manager. These are all the data points that you can combine to search on to basically drill down into the supplier's feed that you're managing. And as you can see, like there's 2 to the 25th minus 1, so that's 33 million combinations of ways to search your supplier's feed for how and what you want to manage out of it.
We looked up that formula.
Isn't the weight duplicate weight greater than less than? Yeah, weight greater than less than.
Yeah, so like that's 2, right? And you can do a greater than and a less than simultaneously, right? And then this is just 1 point because they can only be ever, but that's 3 total unique data points, right? To say I want it to have a UPC, no it doesn't, or I don't care, right? So that's 20 combinations here, 4 combinations here, and now I know there's more than 4 listed, but some of these are mutually exclusive. So if you want to say in my catalog, right, that means you want to sell that product. And in queue, which queue is like a staging area we provide to retailers so that they can say, I'm not ready to start selling this because I want to apply some rules to it and make sure it's ready to go to my store, right? Those are mutually exclusive, so we don't make a combination out of those. But still, you can see 33 million possible ways to view your feed is pretty heavy. So here's our search in action with a really high quality GIF that we made because Google Slides has caps and we can't put videos in it, and it's just really good. So, but here this has 2.6 million products, and now when this search is done, we see there's 297,000 products from this search, and that took a matter of 3 seconds, I think, or so, to perform that search across those 2 million products with the specific subset that retailer has access to, their custom pricing, everything, right? So it's pretty impressive in a way. Also, I'll just mention this combination right here. You see, this is all the search filters being applied of those 33 million combinations. We allow users to create what we call tags, which are a saved search of all these specific fields. And so you say, I always want to be selling something that's $10 to $30 in a specific category. Every time you come back into the system, you can go to here, right, which says not in my queue or catalog. You can view that tag, and then you can say, make sure I push that into my catalog, right? And you can stack those. So what we get is you have one search, another search, and you can say, show me all my tagged products. So then you're stacking multiple ones of these searches on top of themselves. And we still get pretty good speed out of that. So we'll talk a little bit about how we do this. And this is Solar. I don't know if anyone here in the room has ever used Solar or heard of Solar, but it's a pretty amazing platform. It's basically a search platform. So how it makes it possible, those combination of data points, right, that's without Solar, on a traditional database, you'd be having composite indexes. I won't fully go into that, but anyone here is a dev probably understand what that means. And the number of composite indexes you would need to make that possible becomes out of hand very quickly. The flat data structure it provides us, essentially in a traditional database, if you were to try to do this, you would be performing a lot of joins and you'd get back a duplicated a data structure that needs to be normalized. So using Solar allows us to keep a very flat and instantly we can ask it many questions immediately. And the ability to pivot, the idea of a pivot is essentially how we generate the category mapping with those distinct counts or the brands that are available within that feed. That's a pivot, right? And pagination, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with pagination, but every time you hit go to next page, right, and you see the total product count, well, that's not that easy in a traditional database because now you're making 2 queries and you actually, it becomes expensive. Every time you change a filter on that search, you have to recalculate the total. And Solar does this in instant speed. And so kind of the drawbacks of using the traditional database approach, I won't go into all of them. We can talk more about that in the Q&A afterwards if you guys have any questions. But now that a user has gotten all the products they want to their catalog, we need to talk about how does it get loaded up to their actual platforms. And I'm going to
fetch, right? Data has to get fetched by Solar to be able to see it, right? It has to look at the new data,
Yep.
All right, so we have a
It has
sync.
to get indexed, so there's a
We're
step.
not going to go into that process, but yes, there's also the same way we're updating our Redis cache, right? We're also updating Solar to reflect newly generated data or changed data points, right? So that's how we keep Solar up to sync.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pass it back to Matt now to talk about our data output.
Cool. So after all those tools, all those cool tools and everything are applied to the data, you now obviously need to do something with it. And so this is where our output section, essentially how we leverage that for our retailers, right? So what we're outputting, again, it's very similar to what we're ingesting. It's just the opposite, right? So we're now outputting all of that same data that we talked about before to the platforms. But this time, the difference is that you have all the dynamic rules applied, right? You have price markups applied, you have customizations to the product content applied, you have category mappings applied, everything that you need to do that he just kind of talked about, like from within the tools, right? We're going to dynamically apply that. And so we're essentially going to start the process. We're going to fetch the information from the Redis cache cluster, right, that we were talking about. And then we're going to apply all these custom rules to the data. And then from there, we're going to start syncing that to your platform. A big part of this is kind of what I was talking about before, the same difference that we do on the left side, where we essentially ingest that data and we only persist the information that's different. We do the same thing on the platform side. So on this side, we say that if the current information on Amazon, right, is up to date, there's no reason for us to make another request to update that information. And this is specifically important for this side because a lot of these platforms, they have throttling and they have rate limits in place. So essentially right here, you'll see API rate limiting and throttling. That's one of our biggest challenges essentially with automating. Like we can automate, we can get our process honed in and down to the microsecond, right? But at the end of the day, we're throttled by certain platforms, right? Shopify at the end of the day can only handle 2 products a second, and there's nothing we can do about that. So our goal is essentially to minimize as much latency as we can within our system so that whenever we start to push these platforms, we're not the bottleneck. And we can offset that to say, if you upgrade your platform package or if you talk to your platform, maybe they'll give you a different thing. Or if you're on a self-hosted server, maybe you can essentially upgrade your server so you can increase the throughput of those updates. But on this side, we do the same thing, right? We have a core integration workflow built out for the platform side, and that's going to have all the fundamental operations that we need to perform on a platform. We're going to have all the dynamic rules that get applied during this process, and that's going to check for the differences so that we only update the things that we absolutely need to so we can minimize on that throttling. And at the end of it, we're going to always create like a summary of that sync operation that we can provide to the retailer. We can say, how many products do you have on your site, right? Like how many do we update? How many active products, right? Like things, all of this summary information around that platform so the retailer just knows what's going on. And they also can see how frequently we're syncing those updates to them, right? So that's important because people want to constantly know, is my data accurate, and they'll want to run on-demand jobs. The big thing here with the integration mapping, so for every platform, right, there's different mappings. So it's different to integrate to Shopify than Ecommerce or Amazon, obviously. And with that, we'll build that integration one time, but then each integration is going to have some sort of dynamic configurations. So we're going to need to be able to provide an API token or a username and password or something of the sort to be able to authenticate with their platform. Maybe even change the URL in which we access it for like self-hosted sites. So we build our integrations with that in mind. We build dynamic configurations so we can inject that information at the time we're running the update. To accomplish this, we have a very similar setup over here as well. It's just reverse, where we have about 40 plus servers right now. We have significantly more servers on the updating side than we do on the ingesting side. Because on this side, like I was saying, we have 4,500 different channels. Because we only may have 50 integrations, right? But if we have I think 1,400 retailers right now, somewhere around there. And so if each retailer has on average 3 integrations, right? Now we have 4,500 different processes that need to constantly sync data to. So we have a bunch of servers here that can scale horizontally, so we can add more servers if we need to. They're going to pull that data directly from Redis, so they don't hit the database and they don't have some sort of resource bogged down. And the big thing here, and this is actually something that we implemented relatively recently, probably in the last year, we trigger off these syncs after the supplier job is completed, right? So if you're monitoring the supplier data, and the second that job completes, you have 100 retailers that are leveraging that supplier, we can spontaneously, kind of like a chain reaction, right, trigger off all of the updates to these retailers. So this data is now accurate, and we're going to go persist that information to the retailer stores immediately afterwards. So that helps keep things in sync a little bit more, and make sure that the retailer's inventory is accurate to what the supplier's holding at the time. So that's kind of what we do. That's a lot to take in. basically, at this point, you can imagine like all the data that we have in our system. We've got inventory data that's fluctuating. We've got product content. We've got order sales. We've got the time it takes for a supplier to ship out items. We have all of this data at our disposal right now. And we're just going to talk a little bit on how we plan to leverage this information in the future. We're not doing a lot of analytics right now, but we see the opportunity, obviously, and we're accumulating more data as we go. So to talk about some of them, the easiest one is bulk market intelligence, right? Like with this, you can think about if you're trying to sell certain products, right? Imagine if we get 100 orders in a 3-month or a month period, right, that we know they all have the same item on it. So we can tell from our kind of analysis that that's probably a hot item, right? Like it's selling a lot. Are getting sales for it, and if we could provide that information to the retailers to say, hey, this is a hot item, you might want to include it on your store, right? Like it's going to be valuable to them now because now they can make more in sales. They're going to be including more valuable products. With that pricing as well, if they're selling a product at a certain margin and they're not making any sales, and they can see on average this product is selling at a certain rate, across these different platforms, that may let them make a better decision on what they should set their margins at, so they can determine how to make the sale, right? Marketplaces and channels. It's kind of an unobvious one, but you can essentially come down to say hunting supplies sells better on Amazon than eBay, right? Or they sell better at a certain rate, right? Because we see more orders coming from that channel for hunting supplies than on eBay, right? And so if you provide that information to these retailers, that's going to enable them essentially to make a better decision on, what do I want to sell? What's my selling strategy? Where do I want to sell it at? What sort of margins? And just give them like intelligence around all of their tools, right? Enable them to sell more, which ultimately is going to be that they're a better customer and they're going to stay on our platform for longer. Predictive capabilities. This is one that we could do right now. Essentially, we see the volatility of inventory, right? We see the fluctuations as they happen. So if inventory goes down to 0 on a certain item fairly regularly, then we know that that's a volatile item, right? And that you may get an order on that item, and even if there's a 10-second delay in the time that we can sync that inventory, you can get an order that we can't fulfill on because the supplier's out of stock now, right? And so if you know that there's volatile inventory, it kind of lets the retailer do some like risk aversion to say like, do I want to sell that item or do I want to avoid selling that item because it's a volatile item, right? And so they can plan around that. They can set better rules in place to make sure that maybe they want to sell it, but after a certain threshold, right, they want to make sure that it goes out of stock, right? And they can set that as well with the tools. Categorization and metadata. This is a super ambiguous one, but the idea of there's certain categories on these platforms, right? And so the idea is that if you were to do an integration and you have all these messy supplier categories on this side, there are ways that we could say, take this data, analyze it against these categories and try to find a potential match, right? And from there, you could essentially kind of auto-populate some categories, maybe leave some manual interaction for overrides and things like that. Company success. This is a massive one for retailers where we see order volume again, and we could potentially determine how successful certain retailers are versus other retailers. And we can anonymize all that, obviously, but the idea would be that if they're doing certain things that are enabling them to be better, maybe they're selling at certain margins, selling on certain platforms, focusing on a certain niche, right? Or maybe just blasting every single product and just taking what they can on the margins. We can essentially offer some consultant or enable retailers again to say, like, if you're really wanting to be successful, like these are some key things that we're seeing right now on other companies that are being successful, and we can expose that to some people so that they can better grow their business, right? And other uses, there's always more uses. This is a really vast landscape that's constantly growing, and the idea is that we don't actually know all the uses yet, and like we're constantly learning them. And the biggest thing is we're trying to be responsible and not do anything crazy. But we can see a lot of potential uses for the data long term. But that's it. That's all we got. So thank you guys, and I appreciate it. If you have any questions, we're awesome.
So great presentation.
Cool.
I think it was fascinating. A couple of questions. First, how do you guys compare with SaleWho or Wholesale to be the other companies out there? And second, have you guys considered using MongoDB as opposed to the stack which you guys are using?
No.
Sale
That would be counterintuitive. You want to put Akamai out of business.
Right.
There's no need for content management in this whole process because you are the content management, and where everybody else is using the elasticity of AWS, you have the intelligence built into the elasticity. This is retarded.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a part of sorry for using that word, but you're actually using the elasticity to store your data.
What, Redis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cache.
Right.
but
It's not our
the
primary
cache
storage.
is sitting in when you basically are using elasticity to, let's just say,
Right.
propagate a normal MarkLogic or anything else like that. I come from systems that we
Well, your Akamai and your CDN would still be probably on your platform side. If you have a successful site on the front end, Shopify site, you're still probably going to have a content layer there on the end for your kind of mass market.
Is there any
But,
reason
right.
why you couldn't replace it with this?
Well, we're kind of behind the scenes keeping the platform up to date, but like not trying to take the front end of the platform and it's to the customers. That's kind of the retailer's domain. We're behind the scenes plumbing to keep it up to date. So it's a little bit different part of the stack. To answer your question on the sale who, there's a bunch. It's a very fragmented space. There's a common problem and a bunch of people tackling in different ways and companies and in partial ways. Sale is just a directory along with like worldwide brands. You can find suppliers with terms and that's about it. Not much of a toolkit, or it doesn't really do anything. You can find suppliers and go ask them where their feed is, and that's kind of where they stop. Wholesale to be is kind of similar, but on without the tool. I mean, they give you these bulk feeds and you kind of have another big manual chunk your own. So they're all lacking in a lot of the tools. Like the big dog in kind of our space, the market leader would be kind of like a channel advisor, for example. They're a $150 million company, public. But they're heavily on the market side. Like we actually have a lot of mutual customers with Channel Advisor because of our integration layer. So, but it's pretty fragmented space all around. So,
But how is the competitive information here? Because you've got Amazon selling a particular product at very large volumes, right? That's information that could be relevant to other. You're telling you would sell this to somebody. If Amazon knows that you're going to sell that piece of information, they wouldn't want you to have it.
Sure. I mean,
Right.
Amazon may not be the market, right? Like
yeah.
the idea. So like we have retailers on the platform right now,
Right.
and retailers are essentially looking for ways to better sell products, right? That's their fundamental business.
Right.
And so if you can expose some data, to them to enable that process, which there are various ways to do that, right? There are ways to say like this is a hot product, this is a volatile product, or the better channels to sell on, better sources that have better fulfillment rates and things like that, right? All of that data is valuable to a retailer because to them, ultimately, they want to be able to fulfill on products cheaper, faster, and with like high quality products, right?
and our lens is only as big as the data we're actually automating. So obviously by Amazon, everybody's tiny by Amazon standards.
Well, but still, it's information that you could be leveraging what's happening in Amazon and selling it to another small retailer, which could be useful for them, right?
Right.
If they know at what price point they are, this small guy can turn around and say, let me give $1 discount on this and let's see what happens. Right?
Exactly, and then and part of the fragmentation of the
Yeah.
space, specifically on Amazon, there's these tools called repricers that will actually, all they do is go and reprice your products automatically within the rules you give it on Amazon to be competitive. That's the only tool. It just constantly reprices against the competition. So there's a lot of fragmentation.
There are businesses built around basically what you're kind of talking about, how to price on Amazon. I could definitely see value in that. I'm sure we all could. It's just a matter of like a focus, oriented thing right now.
What percentage of your data goes through APIs, and do you see it's changing a lot?
On the platform side, probably.
On the reading the data.
On ingesting it, not a lot.
Yeah, not as much as you'd want.
Maybe
10%.
maybe
This is
10,
what I'm
15,
asking question.
10 or
10%.
15% probably.
And the rest is what?
CSV files, EDI files on FTPs, SFTPs.
Do you see this changing soon?
Yeah, it's a common. There's a lot of ongoing projects on the distribution side where they're trying to upgrade their systems, and they seem to be very long, painful projects for them as they work through it. Because there's a lot of legacy. The longer they've been around, the bigger the challenge it seems to be.
I want to go back to the earlier question. Working with retailers in the past, one thing I've seen is because there's not a lot of daylight in what they're doing, they're offering the same products a lot of times.
Mhm.
Anything they can do to gain a competitive advantage, they really don't want shared with their competitors. And so I wonder if you'll run into that challenge when you start trying to aggregate this data where they go, hey, we really don't want you providing that to our competitors, that data that you gathered we're paying you, like,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely challenges there, and we face some of them now with people that will integrate their suppliers and they don't want those publicized. And we handle that kind of on an off-case basis where it's like we won't touch that data if we have an agreement with them. Obviously, like if you were to go and purchase a website template online, right? If you want an exclusive template, it's more expensive than if you just want to leverage a template on your website, right? It's a similar thing here.
But you're right. We don't get a lot of referrals in the industry because if we're the secret sauce behind the scenes, they're not going to go tell their competitors that you should use this too. And then on the reverse of that, exactly what you said. The responsible use of data is what I'd say. Like, how do we
Just if I may ask, like, how is when you price this whole thing?
buy the integration? So we're a software as a service, monthly service fee, and it's by the numbers of integrations we're managing with a couple of priced features as well.
What is the largest number of integrations per customer that you have to serve? 30? Yeah, 30.
Maybe 30?
He let the rest of the staff jump in.
30 or 40 probably, right around there. That's one of the guys.
How do you advertise and get more customers?
So we're with all the integration partners on the sourcing side. We're one of their main integrators, so they'll send direct referrals of anyone retailers trying to connect to them. We're one of those primary sources. We've got SEO to cross. If you kind of look and put any category and dropship on it, you'll probably find us number one. Software tools, but bunch of different mixed channels to we have healthy inbound. There's no outbound selling.
We do go to IRC.
Yeah, we could go to more. We're testing it out. We presented IRC the last couple of years in Chicago.
Are you running traditional SEO tools through your infrastructure right now?
On our front end website, I mean, for the
Okay,
of
they
the marketing
stop
side.
at SEO stops at the front end.
For
It's not-
ourselves, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the SEO part of our tools for retailers is how they're personalizing their product content. Really. That's how they're
Okay, but they're not
differentiating
tracking the user, looking at the content or anything like that. But of course, you really can't. Are you doing anything New Relic or anything like that to analyze what you're doing inside or no?
It's something we have on the roadmap.
Yeah.
But right now, currently not.
Okay, and are you doing synthetics
No.
to test yourself?
Synthetics is in.
Synthetic transactions, just basically New Relic throws synthetics to just basically go through the entire process.
I'll be part of adding, part of the testing
Yeah.
of rolling out a new integration feature, but it's not built into the continuous deployment
Yeah, right.
yet.
So you said the ingest process, you take varied data structures and kind of normalize it, right?
Correct.
So how flexible is that if something starts showing up and you have like your domain model needs to change? Can you do that, and like
Yeah.
how do you approach something like that? Because you can't stop that feed.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. So we do flex it. Basically, it's a matter of what is presented. Like 9 times out of 10, or more than that, 99 times out of 100, like we don't need to modify our domain model to be able to account for something. Occasionally, we'll get a new field that we want to actually leverage as a feature, like surcharge cost or some sort of dropship fee, right? And in those cases, if we see value in adding that field and incorporating that in our core stack, then we can add it. If it's something like an attribute or something like that, we have a lot of dynamic fields that you can just do if they're not being leveraged, right? If they're just kind of custom attributes you want to pull in and pass through, that's easy enough. Anything like an actionable field, though, we just add that in the report field if we see value in it.
And a big piece is the checkpoint when there's, because they do change without us getting notified that it is going to change, and so we do halt the process and kick out an alert and have to check it out, because last thing you want to do is, with all this power and immediate syndication of all this data, get the wrong data and blast it out there. So a lot of checks in place on that side too when something changes.
Along those lines, like how do you handle failures? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have a perfect product like everybody else.
Sure. Yeah, no, so failures happen a lot just because, I mean, not a lot, but in our space are more prone to failures because, again, people change feeds, APIs change, and we have to react to that. We've got dashboards in place. We've got a support team on hand that basically is alerted to failures. We've got a pretty large dev team for company size, and we essentially just react to it and fix it. It's, as we go, right? But we do have a lot of dashboards in place to help detect failures prior to actually them being impactful to customers and things like that.
Yeah. Are you planning on using any messaging infrastructure? Because you've got a lot of data coming in, and if you're going to have failure points, you're going to process this multiple times if you don't have some of those things in place, right?
So we have thresholds in place, where if a failure were to occur, it throws thresholds, and this is really getting into the nitty gritty, but basically we do have thresholds in place where it's like, it is, like I know I talked about not being transactional, but there is kind of like somewhat of a transaction in place where it's like if a threshold has occurred and we don't propagate that data up. So the idea is if somebody changes their feed and they give us an incorrect file format, right? We have exceptions for that, where it's essentially if that happens, we're going to throw a threshold and we're not going to pull that data feed in and not going to propagate that to everybody's store, right? So we have certain, like he was saying, we have checks in place and thresholds and like business logic and workflows from support and our dev team to be able to react around those type of things.
What if one of those items in there is not incorrect? What would you do?
If
I
one
have
of them,
1,000 items.
yeah, that's just a failure on that item. I mean, that's
We'll define incorrect.
Of that one line is that if the whole file is out, right? It's easy. You can throw it back.
Yeah.
With one line, then how do you go
So it
back and
depends.
reconcile that with your either
Sure.
your supplier or whoever?
It depends. We do keep counts of successes and failures on each at a product level on the channel side we're pushing and all that. So you can just, but basically if it didn't go because of something was wrong, then it's logged as a failure of that particular product.
Yeah, and there are certain
Well,
conditions.
my point is that there is a reconciliation process here, right? that has to happen, that,
Sure.
you know, how many you process. If you run a financial organization, everything is reconciled.
Sure.
It's done 2 times at least to say that you actually did it right.
Sure.
Right.
You're doing it once, but then if it fails, how would you know that it did, is my question.
Well, a lot of what we're trying to do on the tool side is make this more known as the toolkit rather than us solving it across every feed, across every channel for every personalized set of data, providing that alert to the retailer, knowing there's something they have to go fix and address in their data. So being the tool, not the us handling everybody's problems for them.
What ETL tool do you use?
What's that?
What ETL tool do you use?
It's our own.
Oh,
software.
your own?
You're missing the third rail.
What?
The actual payment for it. Any chance on integrating the acquirer, the merchant, and the issuer all onto the platform?
For the payments you're talking
Yeah.
about? Right now, we're not handling the transaction itself, but
Yeah,
one of
what's
our
missing?
one of our upcoming is actually solving the revenue cycle management on that charging and billing and reconciliation side. It's not a product we have out there yet, though. It's
But you're looking at it.
Question.
yes.
I know you got the supplier, you got the product, and you shipped it. Do you have any customer information on who the customer is, any demographics? Do you model on the customers?
Yeah, to some
we
extent,
order
because
data.
we have to pass that information through, right? We have to say to the supplier, ship this item out to the customer. Demographics on them, not necessarily, right, like their age or anything like that, but we do have like the basic
Address.
information so that we
Name
can
and
ship
address.
that product to the
Do you,
customer.
do you keep a history, like could you verify that this customer ordered over these periods of time? So you could
Yeah, I mean, so,
predict future sales?
Yes.
sure, yeah, so the nature of it is that we'll pass that data through to the supplier that's persisted. So if the retailer ever needs to review that information, right, then they can access their orders with that customer, for example.
Okay, thank you.
I'm kind of curious about the physical deployment aspect of it, like geographically. You have 15 servers, and you scale it, when you say they scale horizontally, is that 15 per instance and location, or is it 15 servers?
AWS.
What's that?
It's on Amazon, AWS.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Different regions, US and East,
Yeah.
West,
Exactly.
Couple questions. Do you have some sort of just average number of queries or some sort of statistic as to like how many queries you get before you have to scale horizontally?
So with our servers in particular, right, what we have is like a job dashboard that we monitor, and it essentially shows like based on our amount of servers at the time, right, how many jobs are actively running, right? And when that reaches a certain threshold of like, because we run multi-threaded
I was
servers.
just curious what that threshold was, I guess.
Yeah, so right now we're running like 6 to 9 threads on each server, and it's really by job. It's not on like queries or anything like that.
It's
that,
basically when we're supposed to when it's supposed to have completed things. When we're going over that from basically a completion perspective, then it's time for more. It's not like a by number that way, but it's more about completion time of the jobs they're supposed to do.
Right. It's not as resource driven.
Second question: What made you guys choose? I know it's an easier platform to use, but I don't know. I definitely I could see some pros and cons. Definitely, like if you had used Elasticsearch, and it's more of a distributed platform. Like,
Sure.
what made you choose Solar versus Elasticsearch? I guess.
I think it's just kind of like inherited, like in a way, so it wasn't like an active decision, and now would be like a big switching cost to go rip it out. So, and it works really well for
Because I
what it
originally
does.
set it up
Yeah,
several years ago.
It's a tool that works and works well, so there's no point in demolishing it, really.
Yeah,
So it'd be, what percentage gains could we get
And
out
Solar-
of using a different tool?
Yeah, and Solar is scalable, where you can shard
Yeah,
it, right?
it can do
just-
everything. I think
It's just not as out of the
Elasticsearch.
box, like
Yeah.
plug and play, click the button.
I mean, how
That's
much can you
awesome.
do with distributing all of the interactions with the different servers? I mean, it sounds like it's just horizontally scalable as opposed to being able to communicate back and forth between servers.
Well, our job servers don't actually talk to Solar. Only our front end talks to Solar.
Yeah.
So it's all for
So-
display layered.
Yeah.
Everyone.
And you can have multiple like instances of the site, right? They can both communicate to the Solar. And,
Yeah.
like, there can be like read replicas, sharding of the Solar servers. So it's like you can have many instances of our front end website, for example, talking to many instances of Solar from a sharded perspective, and that works fine because most of the time they route through like a load balancer, for example, and that's going to route all the traffic down to the Solar shards or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it works. It's a little bit more manual effort than Elasticsearch is the idea.
What are you using for load balancing?
We just use AWS as load balancers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course.
Yeah. Makes
Alright,
sense.
so I think we got time for like 2 more questions.
Okay.
When the data source fails, do you mark the other parts of it failed?
want to see that if this retailer goes down and still is paying products, that one maybe something for less.
I guess if it failed, if one of the sources fails.
Yeah.
Do you push a stale signal to your retailers to use the data?
Yeah, no, we halt it and
Yeah, we halt that process, so that's where we were talking about the thresholds. So if a source fails in any sort of way or meets some sort of threshold, right, we're going to essentially halt that process and not do that chain reaction to propagate that to our retailers.
The point I'm trying to make that the data displayed on the retailer at that point is stale.
The data is displaying.
it does
Saying it's out of
fail.
sync now.
Yeah, it is. There's some
Before.
until we can
Sure.
confirm you know, if make sure we get it right. We don't push bad data out, but you're right. That becomes something that gets addressed as quickly as we can. And if it's failing, it's usually because something we have to go reach out on the source side. Their servers are out. They had a problem internally. All these things we've had to deal with over time. So help them get it back. But yeah, we're not. It is their actual inventory levels are out of sync for the most part.
That's one of those
until
things
it's
like
fixed.
out of our control, right? We're going to automate the data as much as we can, but if their servers go down and we can't grab that file, right, there's literally nothing we can do except reach out to them as many times as we can to try to get that server brought back up.
I understand this on question. The retailers, like again, the retailer is displaying inventory of a stale.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So we can notify customers and they can take their inventory down. For example, we have tools to enable that to say like, you know, mark everything out of stock for the time being until I get the accurate one. Sometimes we can resolve those within a couple hours. Right. It's not that big of a deal. It just varies. Right. Like it depends on the outage, the situation, the reaction that we take to notify customers or not. Depends on that. Right. Like we had some supplier that went down earlier and we had to say, you know, I would mark all of your inventory out of stock right now until they can get their issue fixed, right? So we have different reaction levels depending on the issue. Is that it?
Great.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.